Yeah, so it's been a while. I got these as a gift from my sons. And I'm sipping on some carnivore Cafe Bustelo, that is. I've got heavy cream in there. And the carnivore works, man. Say what you like about it. And I try to do as much oxidative movement as possible when I'm observing the carnivore. Got the heater going. It's getting cold right now. And we're going to get some fresh air in and commence with our indoor walking. Why do I walk indoors? Walking indoors is done for a variety of reasons. They're easy to point out. And number one is I don't have to contend or deal with all the disease and the pollution put up on my other channels. Those are the supplements I'm taking. But I'm adjusting right now to carnivore. Something that I cycle back onto. If you want to say cycle, if I say carbohydrates are cycle, I'm eating carbohydrates in a cycled format with protein fasting, which is liquid or powder, protein powder fasting. Clean up my beddings. Just started sleeping on the pad, and I can already feel the difference. A mat in my back, huge difference. Just having a lot of spinal stuff going on there, and now I know the culprit. Rocket science, right? I do crystal light. That's the Cafe Bustelo. It's disgusting. And I take this erythritol monk fruit. And today, and I try to get in some cinnamon as well with that. Today I'm going to be baking some drumsticks. And every time that I do carnivore, I wake up. Number one, I can feel it. And yesterday I probably took a couple thousand calories in. When you add every little thing up, which I've found is unnecessary on carnivore. Let's say I'm taking in the adequate number of calories based on my recommendation, right? Which I believe when you're eating carbohydrates, you can gauge that sort of thing. However, the first calorie testing, scientific protocols were done in a very cold climate, frozen climate, by scientists. And it wasn't that long ago. It's been a while since I've researched that, but it's very interesting. You ought to look it up. I'm not discussing anything that I'm not qualified on, but it was in, a lot was happening 80 to 100 years ago. There was investigatory sciences were at their breadth at their height. And it was measurements of calorie needs, calorie consumption. And those estimations are still with us today. And like a lot of sciences have been proven to be pretty damn accurate, but it's just like the standard model to the universe. Once you break out of those physics, how do you explain the rest? How do you explain the rest? So for me, I start to oxidize fat when I'm eating fat. Wish I would have known that years ago. I would have started out with this, but that's what they do, right? You think these organizations don't understand this? Or do they owe us anything? When I say these organizations, I'm talking about clandestine groups that hold and keep information from the general public. And it's like, how much does someone owe you that's intelligent and thinking about things that you're just simply not thinking about? And not everyone in an organization, especially the henchmen, the guards, guardians at the gate, so to speak, are privy to higher intellectual concepts. And that really describes the Masonic order to a T. And they even work through time to where there's a consolidation, as it seems, as it were, where the higher intellectual knowing agents kind of shrug their shoulders like, what are you gonna do? However you say that with a Jewish twist. And so my part-time passion, it's actually full-time, but I can't remember a damn thing from it. But I will continue to scour the archives as long as they're available in these, what's being phrased, theories of everything, which Kurt Tremongo is doing an amazing job with in a very perspicacious manner. And I mean that. Wasn't planning on walking today. I wanted to train, but as I said, I'm adjusting. I'm adjusting to the diet. This is day 4 of carnivore. As I said, we're cooking up some drumsticks. We're going to be doing some olive oil, salt, pepper, cayenne, with a little bit of garlic in there. Maybe not a little bit. I love the garlic. Ordered more garlic. It should be here tomorrow. This month's different because I've got ample carnivore food for days, you might say. It might last me the entire month, what I've already ordered. And I've already taken out chicken drumsticks. Ordered more, got some this morning. Eggs and shack burgers. So just that in itself is a week's worth of food. Just between three items. And then with the shack burger with a little oil, you got like 600 calories right there. Okay. With the drumsticks, that's easily one full day of eating if I was just eating drumsticks with nothing else. There's a good 10 drumsticks the entire package. And that's the beauty of being right here, is I can do that. I can bust out one of these drumstick packages and show you. Oh, these mofos are still frozen. It might actually take a couple days to thaw out. I got this wrapped up in like 50. What the fuck is going on here? What the fuck? So we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We got 12 drumsticks in this entire package. And no, it's not exciting to see. Since that's still completely frozen from putting it there the night before, I may pull out this fresh one that just came, put that one back in, since it's not going to harm it. Throw that in there. Yeah, there we go. That makes a fucking lot more sense. Am I using more expletives than I typically do? I'd say there's a definite change in my behavior. Almost like different genes are expressed. Because I'm not necessarily hungry, but I am kind of. I suppose more aggressive in a way, but not. Like borderline ready to throw down, which is a good thing, because I'm far too passive, typically. I feel right now an accessing to my stored body fat on day 4. It's day 4 today on carnivore. And what I'd really like to be qualified and able to discuss is the topic that I had mentioned. I tend to just put my toe in the water, because I really do understand the majority of what's being said, or another way of saying that is I don't know what I don't know. But I love listening to the topics of, and I have my own. I think that that's the bizarre thing, is that is the link with psychedelics. Psychedelic analytics. It's this posturing of the mind. I wouldn't even call it posturing. I would say that everything else seems to be a false pretext, a false construct, except for the allowance, right? It's almost like we are spigots that can resist, and once we stop resisting, the consciousness just wants to flow through us. But everything that we've held dear, or at least assumably held dear, all the illusions, all the false construct of society washes away. And we're afraid that we are going to wash away in the process. That the self, the bullshit, let's say the early neurolinguistics, the programming, washes away. And then all that's left is a factual nature of reality, information that it either is or it isn't. Like, to me, it's impossible that Alice in Wonderland didn't come from a very dark, when I say dark, it's beyond the inference of occulted with interdimensional, or however you want, extra dimensional beings, consciousnesses left to interpretation, of likenesses to give them faces, a whole world of motor neuron firing functions that are like a gateway to an electric universe that, if you ever seen the Reanimator, that has a pulse, a consciousness, a theme. And in this quasi environment, we're forced to take on the false moniker of, like the Master Key states it. You got to understand something, that when you think you're reading a book like the Master Key System by a high level ranking Mason, it's just like the Bible. It's giving you information about its operational status, compliance status, that is. It's telling you what it's putting out there in the field. That if you're reading that, you must be reading it for a reason. In other words, the investigation of finding information, you never can just brush against information. In this quasi environment, what I mean by quasi environment, it is an engineered pocket that is held and it is tucked away. I always like to wash my hands because I can feel the chickens. Just last thing I need is, I end up washing my hands quite a bit, especially when I'm doing carnivore. I don't need any germs or botulism or bacteria. Particularly got to run that with warmer water. So I don't really have any fat on me. I mean, I do have fat, but it's like I have a relatively small amount of fat on my lower abdominal area that was stored there each time I go into eating what I love, which is brown rice. But when white rice is only available, I go for that, and lentils. Your body just soaks up and stores those sugars. So the challenge is to cut the carbohydrates, increase the metabolic processes, and burn all the fat away. And I just posted something up on Rogue Beast Warrior where I was making a potential investigatory statement of, you can't be healthy, a postulation, let's say. You can't be healthy when you're in the state of fat or weight loss, as compared to maintenance and bolstering through maintenance, and being able to take in adequate nutrients. So your body's pretty much good at one thing, and when you get in really good shape, there's like an executive process where there's more of a delegation that occurs, where it's kind of like you can anabolize and utilize corticosteroid attributions, the protection of your immune system, the bolstering of being able to fight off existential contagions. Speaking of, I'm going to hit it one more time. I've got eggshells that I keep cooking the shit out of day after day. I'll store them to the side, and then I will cook the living shit out of those things because I'm not going to damage the calcium. And I'm cooking away the organic aspects in the microwave. And I don't need any diseases. I feel now like I'm wasting a lot of valuable resources because calcium is such an important attribute to, muscle innervation, calcium ions, Huxley's sliding filament theory. But to completely try to get away from the fact that we are technology and that all technology is reutilization of pre-existent constants. Ooh, that's hot. There's no reason to even take it out. I just wanted to make sure that cup is cooking. That cup is cooking. We don't want any science experiments. That magnesium can be quite combustible if there's only trace amounts in there. And is it ironic that we perform well, we do better, we meet further toward Vitruvian man when we are eating things that are like us, creatures, living entities, sentience? Like we grasp at a future when we look at movies like The Matrix, right? Where I don't remember the character names, but they're eating that amino acid paste, right? They've got everything they need. And that's just sort of a concept. Right? Because there's not going to be any slop that has to be tasted. That's more of an aphorism, a guide to the future of you taste things now when you eat. So we're going to take a future prospect of, like, to break it down, the constituents that are discussed in that scene in particular, those are going to be stored in the human body. And it's just like if we were to use an Apple product of today and to say an Apple Watch or smart glasses or a headset or a chip is going to be used to analyze our calorie needs, and we won't have to eat anything. It'll be pulled right out of our systems. Like, we're already storing protein. We're efficient at that. We just need to be able to have something that's close to the amino acid state that will not toxify in our systems, and therefore it has to be held back and utilized through nanobots, right? And then to be able to create the proper lipid rafts based on the oxidative cueing, the information that is sent to a biorhythmic sensor through the process of, and that these foods can be combinate directly in the moment of need, right? And that eating itself is causing aging. It's the It's the factor. Digestion, where our blood flow goes, takes up an enormous amount of our energy, and it diverts the living form to an archaic process that people thousands of years ago were doing this, millions of years ago. The people before the people. Humanity before humanity. In a sense, you could use the homunculus as a compartmentalized term to describe Australopithecus, right, or Cro-Magnon, or any of the other postulated, we're going to term them again, aphorisms. It's probably not the right word, but it's like, it becomes an old wives' tale of condensed information that reduces into a single strand of information that once it is juxtaposed and eclipsed by other known or unknown informations. So unknown informations would become obvious to the reader once you can see all the lines of information, like the Human Genome Project. Once you're really able to open up the hood and take a look, you're not just kicking the tires, but you're actually looking at, okay, that's the next one that goes there. I mean, that shows a fascination, a preoccupation that leads into other areas with different types of thinkers that are more sociological and economically based in the way that they process, such as blockchain. So I heard a discussion on theories of everything. So Bernardo, was it Kastrup, or I probably have it wrong. That guy's way too qualified to get it wrong, but I'll have to go back and look. But it was an interview from about a year ago. It's about 4.5 hours. I posted it up on Stellar Mass 13 on the community posts, and discussing free will, whether or not it exists. And then I led on to another interview where someone else is interviewing that gentleman, and they got into some other areas because it's cool about this guy, and I'll have to get his name right, but he's very intimate in his discussions. Like he's literally, his area, the level of locution is going into coitus of conversation. Like he's not fucking around. He's really trying to come out with fucking information, like real information. Like what is, like, let's stop fucking around with semantics, which, like the guardians at the gate, it becomes linguistics and language. And what he's pointing at is something that's being discussed broadly is like a first language. Like if we're doing all these things, whether it's, at first seen as inherent, right, or autogenic, why? And it gets into Jungian, it's not psychology, but psychosis, right? Like it leads right into the UFOs at that time. And you got to understand that when people are talking about symbols, they are not saying this, again, as an aphorism, as this floating zeitgeist goes to the past, or a Zeitgeber, a timekeeper that you can't quantify or measure why it's there. And it's like, look, the doomsday clock and the preoccupation with that many years ago is a real fear, because it's like built within the construct, within the fiber of the carnal, the corporeal, the carbon-based, the mechanism that we hail as life. And the only thing that you can deem, so it gets back into what was being discussed about free will, and that's like this universal consciousness. Yeah, it gets back into age-old Indian philosophies. It's beyond philosophy. It's found in the Vedas, talking about a one-mind principle. But in that, you can't get lost when you go off on this tangent of singing Kumbaya by the river and lighting up lanterns or wherever the fuck you light up to pay homage to your idea, your fluffy, it's vagrant emotions versus taking a more militaristic view, not in opposition, not in polemics, but a more militaristic view, saying, I am rhinoceros. I am a cat. I am a feline. I have claws. I am the manifestation. These are my appendages. And these are not only used for utility, but most of the time in hibernation and stasis, my mind is dreaming of devouring you, whoever you may be, across from my table and all those around from the table, because I'm carrying the table with me with my hunger that's based on my satiety. But what happens when that's removed? When that sort of Luciferian animism, that need, that hunger to compel, what happens when that's gone entirely? Right? What happens when the libido has been not suppressed, not muted, but revealed as a false moniker and turned away from? What string theory is waiting for you then? Or have you just canceled yourself out? See, it seems like a fringe concept that I'm talking about, but I'm talking about an activation process of free will. Not a postulation, does free will exist? It's, when does free will ignite? When does it go through its process? Right? And that, I can answer that. But then I would have to come up with, why does that occur? And it's principles. I figured out many years ago that when Lord is being used in biblical antiquity, let's just say, that it's like a time machine saying, if you do not have principles in through what you esteem, generation after generation of you boneheads, right? Through modernity, what you esteem as modernity, that if you're not utilizing principles, and when we say these principles, I have a friend who always corrects me and says godly principles, and it's true. You have to, but when you say godly principles, you're neither assuming or refuting the hierarchical concept. You're leaving it floating of a God, a Godhead, right? You're not defining it. You're not going, oh, there's 72 other names for God, and maybe there's hundreds, maybe there's thousands when you get into Eastern philosophies, particularly Indian philosophies that are beyond philosophy. You pretty much see a God for every person. And it almost is like there is a God for every person, but some of them are demons. You also can't remove. So this is the more esoteric side of this, where it becomes very liminal in concept and theory, but you leave it floating as to whether or not that is making a statement about your godliness, your Jesus, your Adonai, your Yeshua. Yeah, let's keep going back. Your Zoroaster, right? But really, your Son of God. And it goes into what I would say is part and parcel, which is Neoplatonism, but more specifically panpsychism, and then into a deep investigation of, we're talking about, when we take everything that I was just fringe discussing, is we're taking on a consciousness of the sun itself. Because even though we think that we've moved beyond, and in many instances we have, as we're looking deeper into space, and we are bound to this space-time in consciousness evolution through the processes of a transmutation and an undeniable transition from the human form into computerized or AI measure, to be able to say we want to keep a consistent pattern of consciousness, and the consciousness specifically that hails back to what it means to be human. So we want, even if none of us survive, particularly in the advent of, let's assume nobody is going to, and that's not even important, because when you look at flat time, how the fuck do we get away from it? And it's like, there is no we, there is only the one mind. If there is only the one mind, then there is only consciousness. So could we get away with, could we trick the devil? Could we fly under God's radar? That's what where science is really headed. Could we not break the strand of consciousness? That is what the scientist was thinking, where the scientists left off before they traveled deep into space, traveling with solar sails, traveling millions of light years to get to a place, right? And the body, the human body, wasn't going to survive, wasn't expected to survive. But as far as consciousness goes, the quantum computer enjoyed absolute zero, processed at an even greater rate, didn't break the consciousness strand, and was more than capable and able to continue on with that concept of the one mind, the sun as a conscious being, and a culmination of that goes beyond the Jungian philosophy. So I'm just doing an update of where I'm at right now in terms of continuous gradual intensity training, because I'm taking that application of free will and saying that, so this is my third month. I did not think that I would be doing this for 3 months. I did take a little, I'm not going to say hiatus or leave, but I had to back off a little bit because my son was both sick and he was off work. So I curbed it back to, I think 1 week I only did like 20 something miles. And then the next week I did 30 plus. And that's a very typical undulation when you're talking about 8 to 10 week progressions or 2.5 month progressions. And I felt like taking a break after that. So I'm right back where I was 12 years ago, body fat wise. And I've also seen an incredible anti-aging effect with regards to the training modality that I'm going through. And I'm really just applying the same exact thing. But the beauty is that I've got information available to me. Whereas before, I was living off nothing but protein powder and doing an orthomolecular nutrition. And talk about free will. And anytime you're going through any sort of transitory, transitional state of being and becoming, you are invariably innervating like a muscle of free will. And I think really the argument is where it seems like to anyone free will exists, and why would you question it? You're overthinking things. It gets back into these forks where you're going, no, that's not free will. You have a fork, a potentiality that bends off, right? Where you can hide in these pockets, or you can gain a certain sustenance, almost like a checkpoint. There's various checkpoints for people that think under a certain process that are set in algorithms, almost like genomes. And the consciousness is able to feed, to remind itself that it is a self and it's a specific type of self, life, right? A specific type of life form, and then travel on. And this becomes like a fork in a blockchain where you're following the algorithm, you're following the pace. But could you break off from the entire algorithm? And I think that that's the area of investigation that psychedelics heavily get into and rely upon, is that there's a place where a moment where you could be part of all information, but then to leave that, you're having to leave the capsule, the human form. And if you truly believe that that is just dark, empty, cold space that you're now hovering and mindfully floating within, you're bringing along a heavy assumption of what is when you're trying to find out what is, you know. Physicality, the physical notion. So it seems like a tangent. If you're, and typically I do this on Stellar Mass 13. I try to use that as a live archive. But since I haven't posted here and I even took this channel off operation for some time, I just thought I would feed something back into it. I'm going to be posting on this channel more specifically as I become more educated in terms and investigatory notions of a broader sense of what I'm interested in, what I'm seeing, and that gauges and borders all the way from what Nathaniel Gillis postulates and studies with what he calls malters, to Robert Bigelow and what he's discovered and seen and reports in a semi-cryptic way, so that he's not these information disclosures, these NIDs, these NDAs, what he's talking about is a definite afterlife, right? And taking this and looking into the liminal areas of sciences, all the way into xenobots and far beyond that, theories of everything, physics, human consciousness, and whether or not we are on a track, particularly when we think we're not on a track, we have no other way to gauge as to whether or not we are using a, let's get into God-given attribute of what's been given to us and what's being termed as God, because invariably the construct has to be seen as God, and then you have to go the principles, the Lord, the higher mind. How do I access this information? What do I have to be to come to the table? Number one. And how do I place an order when I'm at the table of what I need to inspire the constituents of thought, right? And how do I maintain and perpetuate this so that it's not just one meal, right? Sustenance. So we are doing it. We are being and becoming. One could say once you're exercising, once you're moving, you have the choice. You're in the labyrinth, so to speak. You're in the matrix. And the one thing that you have to decide is whether or not you're going to move your ass while you're doing this, postulating, ruminating, or whether you're going to sit on your ass. And a lot of people who look at the cosmicism, the determinism, however you want to deem it, predetermined, might say that there's no real difference, that it's a preoccupation and an illusion, an illusory notion, as to say, yeah, you got shredded, you burned all that fat. In the moment, you felt like you were changing your cards, you felt like you were changing your identity, you were embraced and seen in a certain way. But did it change the event in any way? In other words, did your application of what you deem as free will really pan out? Or like a Middlebrat set, if we back up enough, you're stuck in the motherfucker. You're still in it. You didn't even go an antithetical, contrary way like you thought. You're still spinning the same way. You're still in the same vicinity. You're still being carried along. You might have swapped positions, and that's as far as like with your enemies, or those who seem to be juxtaposing themselves again antithetically against you in order to show a contrast and try to compete in a as for superiority. And then we're even that could be postulated as it was predetermined that you would come to the principles, and that's all that was important. It didn't matter if you were frozen to death and dying, sleeping in in the gutters or the back streets of your schools, right? That you went to and ended up pretty much passing away and dying homeless, shivering with nothing, not even a blanket, or that you were sitting up in that high-rise penthouse apartment and made that choice, the soul was either void or full. Regardless, you ended up at the same conclusion. That's really what this postulation of free will is. It's about, can you change information, or do you take on a little more executive, I'm going to say secretarial, are you an employee? Are you a derivative of a corporate structure? Are you a worker? Is it necessary for you to even do anything? Or are you just a rate propagation signal? Maybe you're not even that. That the one mind implicates that information will be carried on regardless of what you esteem yourself as. You had to have some sort of ego. And it's, when we get into this whole area of this, it's the death of the ego. It's the understanding and embracement that the sun itself has a consciousness, and that its consciousness imbues all consciousness, and that the sun itself, if not looked at and worshipped from, like, even to assume that the tribal mechanism of what we would think is sort of like heretical, mundane, rudimentary thought process. Maybe there's just really no way, but like, we can't even understand cave paintings. We can't even understand language that's expressed as a universal mechanism or tool. We can't even ontologically break down what is even being said or postulated as that epistemological breakdown nears its ready before us, that we're bastardizing the information by compartmentalizing it into a bastardized language. That for us to get into the actual matters of the facts, we have to be able to fully understand the language, and the only way to really do that is to go through the experience, to be an experiencer. So it gets into the operator. Like, is the operator completely contaminated? That's the real quest. And in doing that, could you develop an AI system that could take on even an emotional status to recreate a moment? That's what we're getting at. That's what all of this is culminating toward. It may seem really fascinating, almost like it's entertainment. And those who are entertained do not see the spectrum, and how the spectrum, when you back up in a macro view, is displaying that this virtual world, there are those who think they're franchising off of it, and they will die. They're just trying to stay alive a little bit longer to become that strand of information. They think that they're employing free will. You get what I'm saying? Is that once you look at the grand scale of things, in a sense, it's this loop, this atlas, rolling that boulder up that never-ending hill, right? Or carrying that world on your back. And like in an objectivism sort of way to say Ayn Rand and Atlas Shrugged was really saying it doesn't matter if you shrugged. To everyone else, maybe it really was a seismic event. But in the grand scheme of things, of course, you shrugged, you farted, you digested, but you were still pushing that motherfucker up the hill, or you were still balancing that world upon your shoulders. And that is to say that it takes effort. And the effort is a preoccupation, but it's also an entropy-based thermodynamic constant of energetics, and what we esteem as chaos is utilized as a scientific concoction. And it's happening all around us, in us, through us. We all want to take advantage of it and come out as the privileged one. We all esteem ourselves in such a way. And then the ego has to die. Another great program that I listen to and I think is really improved in a huge way, and it must take so much. Soraya, where did the road go, is a term that he uses. And he's talking about things like the way this investigatory thing works is like, what is it? Was it Roberts? It's Seth. This investigatory. So I got ahead of myself. The dark night of the soul is what I was referencing. Okay, but in cotangents, I'm going off on these letters from Seth, which was this divination where there was an entity that was causing this autogenic writing to occur through this particular individual. And the things that were said, I guess that these have been entered into, I don't know if it was Harvard Library or archives, but it's like these things are hard to find, but they were taken very, very seriously. You have to check it out. It's the most recent. And well, obviously what I'm doing is I have a shitty memory in some areas, but I understand the meaning, and I'm really looking for the meaning, but I need to go back and watch something or listen to it 3 times before I can say a name, a source, but I understand I'm looking for the fabric of the meaning, and I'm putting it all together in this sort of mastermind tapestry. Right? I feel like I've always felt like the world could end at any moment. Right? But in the grand scheme of things, that impending anxiety, that perpetuation, that's just the feeling, the culmination. But I still believe it. I still believe that that it's so detrimental. Like even in my saying, the sun could explode in X number of billions of years, and it's like, and it will happen, sort of thing. And the chances of it happening long before that, you could look at it in a factor-based system, and that's just what bored physicists do. And then they realize that their mathematics and their languages was based on exactly what I'm talking about, the subjectivity of the times and availability. It's, you couldn't really make that statement without understanding higher mathematics and being really good at it. And then you get lost in it. I guess you could almost view mathematics as the descriptor of everything that I'm talking about. Like it's the closest thing. It's the closest thing. To assume certain constants or norms, but then to look at how Every single process through equation begins fundamentally in its first application, such as the Fibonacci sequence. Like you're starting out postulating and saying that's zero. But what if that wasn't zero? What if that was monad?